Yeah, hey man, thank you for joining. Can you introduce yourself real quick for people who might not know you?
Yeah, of course. Hello, this is Dread, and
You did the
I make a
thing.
lot of. I know, right? I have been making Last Epoch content for about the last 4 years now. I've been here for a very long time. I play way too much of this game, to be honest with you. Like way, way, way too much of this game. But it's been like a passion project of mine. I accidentally got into all this because I wanted to go into video editing as my career, and then I was like, hey, let's make YouTube videos. It'll give me an excuse to edit and stuff. And at the time, I was just playing Last Epoch, and then all of a sudden, it kind of just started ramping up. And now I make a lot of LE content.
Yeah, I mean, I really like your content. If people ask me who you are, I usually say you're the math of Last Epoch, because like you're just like shitting out videos, but not shitting out videos in the way other people do. Your videos are actually well thought out, right? So they usually make sense. So big ups for that for sure. Definitely.
That's kind of funny because when I was thinking of how to do my videos, Mathel was actually the inspiration in the beginning.
Yeah, it shows.
So I was just like,
I mean, I started
let's
making
do
content
this.
because of Mathel, so yeah, I can definitely relate. So talking about builds in Last Epoch, what's your favorite thing about Last Epoch versus, for example, something like PoE when it comes to build making?
I think the favorite part by far is when I started playing Path of Exile in the beginning. It was like 3.0, so I was already in the midst of people who've been playing for years. While with Last Epoch, I've been able to kind of play since the beginning, right? Kind of like how a lot of people who play PoE probably feel if they've been playing since Piety was like the last boss or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like I've been playing Last Epoch since Zarek.
So you have like a little bit of an edge from the get-go.
It's partly that, but also partly because I feel like as though I've been a part of the history of the game, if that makes sense. Like, for instance, when Druid was out, right? That was a big moment. When Rogue came out, that was also a big moment. And now, of course, with Rune Master and Warlock and all that coming out, it feels like there's a lot of stuff to be explored that hasn't been explored yet, right? And with PoE, it's a little hard sometimes to find that stuff because, it's been around for that long, right?
Yep.
Like, for instance, the most fun I've ever had in PoE of late was when I was playing Blink Arrow, Mirror Arrow with the new Transfigure gems. That was fun because it was new stuff that no one else has touched yet.
So you kind of feel like in PoE you're just a dime a dozen, and in this game you kind of feel like somebody because you were there from the get-go?
It's partly that, and partly more like I feel like a pioneer, if that makes sense. Like I feel like I'm exploring. It's like exploring the unknown.
Yeah.
It's not like from a personal I want to feel like this. I want to feel like I'm cool or whatever. It's more like just it's been interesting.
You feel hipster. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been interesting going through all of this testing and all that, because one of the things that I wanted to do in the beginning when I started playing is I wanted to play every single build in existence.
Yep.
But I also didn't want to just play the builds. I wanted to play them and know them and understand them and be good at them and become essentially a walking dictionary when it comes to Last Epoch. And that's essentially what I've been doing over the past few years. And for the most part, I either know the answer to your question probably, or I know who could answer your question.
Yeah, it's a good feeling, right? And I guess the problem in PoE is if you haven't been playing for a lot of hours, thousands of hours, it's very hard to be that guy, right? It's almost impossible. Also with how many skills there are. So you kind of have to specialize. In this game, it's definitely possible to be a jack of all trades.
Oh yeah, especially this early on. It's getting harder and harder by the patch, obviously. For instance, I have essentially given up entirely on Rogue.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be the same thing at some point, right? In 3-4 years, people are gonna come in and they're gonna have the same problems as with PoE. That's what people don't realize right now. It's like when people say this game is so approachable, so was PoE at the start, right? I haven't played in beta, but when I came in, PoE was simple as hell. It was actually really easy to learn. And this game is gonna become more and more complex as the layers are added as well, right? So it's just kind of natural.
Yeah, and that's definitely why it feels nice to get in there in the beginning, so that if I want to be good at the game, at least I've been here from the start kind of thing. And
Yeah.
that's definitely been an edge I've had. But like I said, for the most part, the reason I just started early was just because like my friend bought me last Epoch and I just started playing it in the PoE off season, and here we are, right?
Yeah.
It was completely on accident.
Yeah, a buddy of mine told me about this game back then. Like I started, I think, whenever it first got on Steam, basically a few weeks later, he linked it to me, and I was like, this is kind of dope. Back then, I had obviously a lot of hours in PoE, and I was looking for something. I wasn't a content creator at all, and this game is just like brains off, just grind, right? It's really fun.
Yep. Definitely feels good to play.
I also, something I've heard from a lot of D2 players is they really like, I'm not a D2 player, but I can really agree with that. I really like how mindless the grinding is, which a lot of people feel like is a problem. Like a lot of people say the end game is actually monotonous, which I agree with, but that can also be an upside, right? I really like coming from PoE where I have to buy scarabs, buy sextants, have the right Atlas passive tree setup, just getting here and just grinding, right? As long as you have goals in this game, it's actually kind of fun.
Yeah, I always joke that like 99.9% of my work when it comes to this, like on YouTube and all that, is just playing the game. It really is just playing the game. Like,
exactly. I actually have, in PoE, I have more fun theory crafting than playing the game. And in this game, I have more fun playing the game. But I guess we'll get more into the into the midst of builds right now. When we're talking about builds, how do you approach like making a new build, or maybe like where do you start? Do you just pick a skill and you just try your best, or do you have like a plan?
So when it comes to that, there's usually two ways. The first is an update. So like I played this before and I feel like something has changed in a major way that I want to update it. So like for instance, recently, Forge Guard. There was an update to Smelter's Wrath where now instead of getting more armor while channeling when you're channeling Smelter's Wrath, you get double armor while channeling while Smelter's Wrath. And that's a very big difference because essentially what it would do is it lets you cap your armor way quicker as a Forge Guard, which means you can focus more slots on HP and stuff like that and get chunkier, right? At least that's the concept of that. And I've played like Smelter's Wrath like 5 times now, and every single time it's still been bad, don't get me wrong, right?
Yeah.
But it's been progressively getting better until it feels like it's a good build, right? And the other way is just delving deep into new things. Like for instance, yesterday I started leveling a warlock, and I'm like, okay, let's try this out, and I just try it out. And if it ends up being good, we continue with it, and I continue until like the logical conclusion of the build, whether that be a video or me getting angry that the stupid freaking dot sword isn't working right now, right? Like whatever it ends up being.
just to chime in there, when you say logical conclusion, so I feel like I'm not saying Last Epoch is not beginner friendly. It is definitely beginner friendly. You can jump in and you're gonna get to a certain point with the build guide, right? Even if it's your first playthrough. But I definitely feel like people are overestimating how far you can get without having knowledge in this game. When would you say is usually that logical conclusion when you say a build is just not gonna cut it?
So usually when I go into empowered monos, as soon as I go into empowered monos and I see how the build feels and I update it a little bit, like I upgraded the gear, like for instance on this warlock that I'm playing right now, I went and upgraded the gear a little bit, got some better pieces, and I looked at the damage and I felt it. Like how fast am I killing the monsters, right? And then I went and hit the dummy a little bit and looked at the numbers with, the knowledge that I have with like what kind of numbers I need, right? And I was like, okay, is this actually going to scale? Like how much more investment can I put into my gear to make this feel better? And this one passed the test because it has absolutely disgusting single target. So I was like, okay, it has disgusting single target, but the clear was kind of meh. How do I fix that? And we did end up fixing that. But that's like the kind of like idea. It's like when you get to empowereds is about when you will know if a build works or not, because that's when the game starts punching you in the gut.
Yeah. So basically when you start, for example, 100 corruption, if it doesn't feel like you're dominating, then you're probably going to conclude that at 400, 500 corruption, wherever you want to get to as your benchmark, is probably not going to work out, right? If you're already struggling.
Exactly. Like if you're struggling when you get to empowered, like if there's a problem and you feel like you either don't have enough damage or don't have enough defenses, and you go like do a gear pass where you like set up your gear better. Like for instance, I went from like 1.3k HP to 2.9 in like one gear pass, right? On this build when I got to Empowered, right? As soon as I did that, I was like, okay, the build feels fine. We're fine. I just needed to do like one gear pass. Like it's fine. I was just leveling. But like if I do that and the build feels awful, like I know people are funny when it comes to this, but like I only play builds where I feel like I'm having a good time. If I am not having a good time, I am not going to play that build like at all. Like there are certain builds like I have never touched because I just haven't felt like, for instance, I absolutely abhor detonating arrow. Like detonating arrow, I hate it with a burning passion. And there are plenty of other people that have played with detonating arrow and had a good time with it, but I just can't be bothered with it right now.
Yeah, if you don't like the mechanical side of a skill, I mean, it's dead in the water, right? It's like in PoE, when people link me Molten Strike POBs for League Start, and I'm just like, that's nice, but I don't want to play a strike skill for League Start, right? I'd rather, I don't know, play something else.
Yeah, exactly.
So when it comes to builds in this game, something this game hinges on a lot more than other ARPGs, I feel like. Even Diablo, I would argue, is its uniques. How do you like the unique design in this game in terms of how they enable certain builds? So obviously, you would say in Path of Exile, for example, the build could intrinsically already be something that it isn't. Like you could already morph it around with I don't know, certain variables. In this game, you need to first find a unique and then build around that. How do you like that approach?
So I'm watching your stream right now and I'm looking at your stash. And I can give you a beautiful example here. So in the beginning, it was awful. Absolutely awful. Look at the Coral Aegis, the shield, real quick for me. That thing, that was made years ago. That thing is absolutely awful. Like
terrible.
You look at that and you tell me, like, what do you think?
I'll give you my take why I actually think the shield is better than a lot of other uniques if you want to right now.
Well, yeah, but like when you look at that, does that inspire you?
No, it doesn't inspire me. However, one of the things I do not like in this game, so I don't like how with a lot of uniques, you kind of get shoehorned into certain builds.
Exactly.
So it feels like the devs thought of certain setups, cool setups of a skill, and they just said, instead of putting that onto the tree or just making it possible normally, we're just gonna hide it behind one or two uniques. And then those uniques are just so obvious, right? So what I, for example, love in PoE is solving puzzles, right? Like seeing patterns and figuring out stuff yourself. In this game, it's very front-loaded. It's very obvious what you have to do. The example I always bring is Nemesis, right? If Nemesis was a last Epoch skill, it would say, for example, Frost Claw returns to you at the end of its travel, right? Whenever you cast Frostclaw, get a frosty stack. It stacks up to 5 times. And then whenever you hit with a melee skill, I don't know, consume your frosty stacks, and now you get pen for the next Frostclaw attack or whatever, right? Like that would be the last Epoch version. It really clubs you over its head with what you have to do. And in my opinion, I actually like designs like Coral Aegis more. The abilities suck, right? Like, none of this makes any sense. But if you have 200 uniques that are like Coral Aegis, it kind of makes sense because now you have, like, these building blocks that aren't, like, Diablo 3, where it tells you which skill to play. Just that the way Last Epoch does it is, it doesn't just give you more multiplier, which is a lot more interesting, right? For example, it doesn't just say, I don't know, your decoy does 400% more damage. It says, oh, it procs bees, and then those bees you can scale, blah, blah, blah. It's way more interesting, but it still absolutely just tells you what to do.
Yeah, and I think a good example, so of recent, they've gotten way better at this, by the way. So whenever they make an item that is like focused on one mechanic or one skill, they try to make sure that the base stats are good enough so that it's actually interesting for like 20 different builds. So like, for instance, Hands of Judgment is a beautiful example. So Hands of Judgment, the thing that's interesting about it is it has like about 3 different lines about judgment and then 2 different lines that aren't judgment. So the reason why these gloves are interesting is they have a very low LP level. So getting 3 LP on them is very easy, right?
Yeah.
And the second thing is you can either play the judgment thing where you do the unarmed thing, like have some fun, like one punch judgment, right? But The more interesting thing about these gloves is if you look at the rolls, the attunement goes to 16 and the fire pen goes to 24%.
Yeah.
If you're playing a build that's scaling attunement for some reason or scaling fire pen and you get a 3 LP pair of these, you don't have to use it for judgment. These are just a really good pair of gloves, right?
Yeah.
For like a fire crit build or whatever. And another interesting thing is like this is really focused on utilizing it with like the unarmed judgment. But I've literally played a judgment build where all we cared about was the cooldown, because the cooldown rolls all the way to 64%. And there's a build where you play judgment and you make a bunch of dot pools.
And you don't go unarmed. You just get the CDR. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just get the CDR. And this is the new design that I appreciate heavily with the I appreciate this significantly. Another unique that really drives home this idea of at least it's useful in this regard is Falcon Fist. Falcon Fist. Oh my god, when I saw Falcon Fist, I like fangasmed. I was so happy. So essentially Falcon Fist, the idea is you do the unarmed Cinder Strike thing with the falconry levels, right? But the last 2 lines, the 24 flat fire for your minions, that is a very rare stat. Or it used to be before this patch, obviously, until they added all
that's
the
like as much as a one-hander gives you at like tier 4, I want to say. Right?
And it also the melee attack speed. Look how much melee attack speed that gives you.
It's a lot, and they're pretty stingy with attack speed.
It's really low LP too.
That's a tier 6 or a tier 7 attack speed, basically, right?
And you can get that with a tier 6 and tier 7 attack speed with the LP system.
Yeah.
And I think they finally realized the strength of the LP system, that they can make niche uniques interesting for everyone if all they do is just like add interesting stats that normally don't go there or are higher than normal. So like for instance, another good interesting option is a Blood of the Exile. So the reason why these are so interesting is because these are just really good.
Yeah, they're insane.
Like not only can you get a bunch of movement speed on them, right? Obviously, you can also abuse the strength, the dex, and the int very easily. So like if you have a max rolled one, you're playing like a low life, or you're playing like a ward build that isn't low life, you have like 48% increased armor, which is insane on low life, or just ward in general. You get 48% retention, which is insane. And then if you just be happening to be playing a blade build at the same time, all of a sudden these boots are insane. But they're like, still usable outside of that.
66% bleed duration. I mean, it's crazy. I definitely agree with you. I think the LP system does open up quite a bit. However, there's also like a problem that comes with what you just said, which is that in endgame, you're just going to look like a Diablo character where you're just going to have only legendaries, right? Which... I don't know if I love... Sure, you could argue that that's not completely true because some of the base types of exalted items are just so crazy. But a lot of these newer uniques actually have good base types. Like Falcon Fist is not a bad base type, for example. So it's like... It just kind of becomes weird. But then you could also argue that's actually kind of hype because if you find 3 or 4 LP Falcon Fist, it's crazy, right? So it's just more chase. I don't know how to feel about it. I definitely agree with you that the new way of them balancing, like for example, something like Cleaver Solutions is the perfect example of how I want my uniques to look like. This unique,
I agree,
is perfect. Like if they make every unique kind of in this style, this is like a PoE unique. This is exactly how I think they should go moving forward. And you're definitely right. Like there's no problem with having certain uniques just kind of shoehorn you in. The only problem I have with stuff like Falcon Fist is like when they give you all these tools for unarmed, you just know they tested this out, right? You know it's never gonna be busted, right? You just know because it's very easy to balance when you make it's very easy to balance if you make the whole build around one unique. You just slap it on. You just see how it performs, and then you're like, oh, we're gonna twist the numbers a little bit.
My problem with Falcon Fist is the opposite. Where like, why does Cinder Strike need this much to be viable?
Yeah, exactly. That is also a
why
very...
don't you just make Cinder Strike good?
Exactly, and that's a good point. And with Cleaver Solution, right, you look at this item. When I saw this item and I have not seen a single build guide about it, I was like, this is gonna be broken somewhere. There's no shot this is not broken somewhere. And lo and behold, it is, right? So that's what I love. Those are the kind of items I love. And yep.
To note something very interesting with the Cleaver Solution is when they nerfed it by raising its LP level. I think that is one of the coolest things that the LP system has provided. That, let's be real, if something is overpowered in PoE, odds are they're probably going to nerf it for the most part, right? But remember that one moment where like they nerfed Ashes by just nerfing its drop rate instead of actually directly nerfing it? You could still play with Ashes and it was fun, but it was more expensive. And that's how I like the LP system takes that philosophy but ramps it up to 11, because now it's a lot more interesting, because now a cleaver, you can maybe possibly get a 2 LP one maybe eventually, right? But a 3 LP one is definitely a lot more harder.
And you're not going to get a 3 LP with a good strength roll as well, right? Like a 2 LP with 9 strength is going to be better than a 3 LP with like 3 strength, for example, right?
And the item isn't dead.
Yeah.
It's not dead in the water. It's not
I guess that's true, but one of the things that PoE struggles with when it balances by rarity is it just divides the top players from the bottom players even more.
Yeah.
So that's definitely also a problem with LP, especially
about the LP. The rarity of cleaver didn't change. You can cleaver is as rare as it is.
Sure, but
last patch.
The top end is going to be harder to reach, right? Is what I'm going to say.
But the bottom is still easy to get. Like, for instance,
the baseline is better. Yeah, I do agree. I think it's a great way, and the more levers you have to nerf stuff or buff stuff, the better in general.
Yeah, like if a noob watches like a video on like Palsteron playing with like a 3 LP cleaver solution, he could very easily start with a 1 LP one and not feel like as though his build is garbage, right?
Yeah.
But if you have an Ashes in your build, or whatever item that's expensive, like a Mage Blood, there's no budget Mage Blood.
Yeah.
You know, like you can't just like have
totally true
Mage Blood, but worse.
Totally true.
And that's what I like about this change.
Yeah. This is just to get a little bit away from a little bit of negativity, I guess. But yo, Milky, thank you for the raid. The biggest thing I like about Last Epoch is it feels a little bit like in Diablo 4, the Codex, where getting uniques to start your build off is actually really easy. And then you can min-max it later, right, by getting LP. That is something that I think Last Epoch does even better than Diablo 4. And it's something that's sorely missed in PoE. Because when you go for a League Starter, for example, what are you going to do? You're going to put in maybe like a tier 4 unique and rares, and that's about it. When it comes to the future of this game, do you think it's going to get more and more complex, or do you think they're going to try and keep it a little bit more low profile? When it comes to build making especially. Because like stuff like POB doesn't exist currently in Last Epoch, right?
So that has been an interesting point of contention and an interesting topic of late. Because the way that the developers seem like as though they want the game to go is they want it to be a simpler game. Right? That's their aim and their goal. But of late, it's been very awkward. Because do you know what a glyph of insight is?
Yeah, sure.
So a glyph of insight right now, they're like, so LE really prides itself on being able to like do your loot filter in game, and like you have a game guide in game, and like, you know, everything's explained in game and all that. The glyph of insight calculator is almost as like complicated as like the synthesis shenanigans, like not as complicated, obviously, but like the old synthesis implicit shenanigans. So it's just a hard left turn versus like what they've been doing over the past few years, which I'm not against per se. It's just inconsistent. And then that was fine as like a one-off. It was like whatever. But then they introduced the Merchants Guild, and I think the Merchants Guild is like one of the most obtuse systems that they've ever introduced. Like a new player clicking on like the Merchants Guild and like going there, right? Like that is an insanely obtuse system, and I have no idea how they thought that like this was a simple system.
I have not played it yet, so I can't comment on that, but I've heard things.
Essentially, not only do you have to go to each vendor to like look at all the vendors, right? The UI is very it's not the best UI ever. Like you can't just like search for things and stuff like that. It's very I don't know, like it feels like there's a lot of friction, right? But in like the bad way, where it's just like obstacles being put in your way. And as a new player, I could not imagine how you would feel, because as someone who's been playing for 4 years, I even thought the system was annoying as hell. I mean, couldn't imagine a new player.
But that's the thing that I'm always so curious about, because the way the Last Epoch community places Last Epoch is this game that's gonna be in between Diablo 4 and PoE, and I just don't see that happening. This game is so much more complicated than PoE was when it first came out already, right? Like, if they want to add layers and layers on top, they're going to have to do a lot of thinking, which I'm sure they are, right? But they're going to have to do a lot of thinking about how they actually want to keep that. Because this is the perfect example, right? Glyph of Insight, this is just one mechanic that they added. It's not even a league. Like, we don't have a single league yet. And they want to release 3 to 4 month cycles. So I just, it's going to be hard to keep that simplicity, quote unquote.
The simplicity quota has definitely been insanely inconsistent of late, I will say.
Yeah.
It's been interesting because, like, the biggest problem that they've had over the past 4 years is, this is a personal opinion, by the way. This probably isn't how it actually is, but this is just my personal opinion. It feels like they've been marketing towards the Path of Exile audience a lot, right? With like their sponsorships and stuff like that. But then they like don't want to make a Path of Exile game, like a Path of Exile like level of like Path of Exile in terms of complication. Like, they don't want to do that, or they don't want to make a hardcore ARPG. But then they do that, and then they introduce the Glyph of
mixed
Insight,
signals
right?
for sure.
Yeah, it's like a lot of mixed signals, and I have no idea like what they actually want to do. Like, in terms of like that, after seeing the Merchants Guild, like I have no idea what they want to do in that regard.
To be fair, I will say I actually think it's a lot better than I thought it would be, because at first I was like, this is gonna be the worst, right? There's gonna be glitches, there's gonna be duping or whatever. So for an auction house, also remembering Torchlight Infinite when it first came out, for an auction house, it's actually decent, I would say, but I haven't played with it yet. But wouldn't you say it's at least serviceable for a first patch?
I mean, it's not designed for phones, so that's a good start. I think it's fine. I just think that, like, for instance, if you go on the auction, like if you go on the auction house and you go look for an item, you can't see the tiers of the affixes on the item.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like, there's not even like an alt button or like a tool. Like, that's like one of the most important things that I look for on the market. Because like when I'm looking at the market and I'm looking at an item, I'm like, what do I need to do to improve this? Like, can I Glyph of Despair this affix? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I like maybe use a Glyph of Chaos to fix this item? That's the first thing I look for. And it was the first thing that just like, why isn't this here? It's like, I don't want to say this, but I will. Like, it makes me feel like the person who made the merchant, like the.
So some people in chat say you can actually see the tiers. Just FYI.
Wait, what? What do you mean you can see the tiers? What? Where? I'm confused. Like, you literally can't see the tiers, like next to the item.
You can see the tiers and fortune potential, mouse over the item, then press Alt.
Okay, now that's just crazy. All right, they should literally just show them. see, this is the problem. How would I ever know that?
I mean, well, to be fair, it's the same on normal items, right?
Alt.
But yeah,
I'm pressing Alt. It's not showing me that. It's not showing me it.
Is that showing you
right now?
Okay, that's weird.
I'm literally doing it right now.
Last Epoch Veterinarian did.
My equipped helmet in the right, I can click Alt and it shows me, but I can't do it on the item in the shop.
Okay.
It has to be on the picture of the item. Oh, okay. Now that's just okay. Yeah, that's just bad UI design. Okay, how that's insanely bad. Like, how is a new player gonna like realize that? Like, come on, man.
We're playing Last Epoch right now. You don't say stuff like, you don't criticize anything. Okay, you're making Last Epoch content. Chill.
Oh boy.
Chill. Okay. There's nothing bad about this game. All right. Either way. So okay, to kind of round this discussion up, I guess, if you had some tips and tricks for beginners in terms of build making, what would those be?
Hold Alt. For the most part, most items, skills, and everything, they have pretty good like explainer text at the bottom of it. If you just hold Alt,
yeah.
Like, for instance,
I'll just show it off. Yeah. So for example, you can see what intelligence does. For example, right here.
Yeah. So like, for instance, on a prismatic gaze here, it says release all prism shards when you directly use a skill that costs at least 40 mana, right? Well, if you hold Alt, it says mana cost does not include mana consumption effects. Well, I would not have known that unless if I hold Alt, right? Stuff like that. Like,
that's you hold like Alt on this item, you can see a lot more description. Yeah. I guess another thing that people, if I might add my own point onto that point, is always check what your skilling tags are before you start out the build.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is holding Alt on the skill, because like half the questions I get could be answered like just by holding Alt on the skill.
Yeah, for sure. What else is like pitfalls that you see new players make? in terms of build making.
When it comes to Last Epoch in general, you got to think of, if you're from Path of Exile, right? If you look at a skill and you type in more damage, right? And you look at all your more damage modifiers. For the most part, you can see how much damage you're dealing, stuff like that. And the problem is, in Last Epoch, there's a lot of skills right now that have a very large amount of more damage. And there's a lot of skills that don't have a lot of more damage.
Yeah.
So like, for instance, if you type more in like Cinder Strike's tree versus
you see like nothing.
Earthquake's tree. Yeah.
Versus Glacier.
Mm-hmm.
I think,
Yeah.
if they still have it.
Yeah, Glacier has a lot of more, yes.
Yeah.
And the problem here is, like I said, if you're from Path of Exile, you got to think of the more damage modifiers as your support gems, right?
Yeah.
If you have a skill that only has one more damage modifier, that's like having a 2-link in Path of Exile. It is awful.
I guess to bring that point home, basically what you mean is don't just look at the skill and how much damage it deals base. Also look at all the points you would take, because it's like some skills are playing a 3-link versus other skills are like 6 links.
Yeah. And this used to be the only case, by the way, back in the day. But recently, their design philosophy has changed significantly so. So if we take a look at Frostclaw here, Frostclaw has barely any more damage modifiers. But Frostclaw has a lot of things that boost its damage by not just saying more damage.
Yeah,
so you have stuff like Volley of Glass. You have things that increase its cast speed, that give it better base damage, triggers other skills, which then can also be as more damage modifiers, right? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Global more damage modifiers. So,
which is very interesting. I think that's a great way to balance, honestly. Mechanical
I think
changes.
it's a great. Yeah, I think it's a great. That's why I say Frostclaw is like one of the best design skills of all time.
Great skill. Like when I saw this, so just for history, Mage was the first character I played. And I still remember trying, this was like the first character. I had no idea about this game. I think it was 2019 to 2018, whenever. I wanted to play all these cool Sorc skills, and they just cost so much mana. And what I ended up playing was just, I think it was like trying to go Meteor or something. And I just literally had to stand there with focus, right? Just getting my mana back over and over. And it was the worst playstyle I've ever played in any RPG. There's nothing worse I've ever played. So Sorc needed a lot of help. And with Rune Master, I feel like they really took a look at Mage again and kind of made it better. Obviously, Sorc still has huge problems. But
Sorc is getting there. It's like, the thing is, it's funny because like Sorc was just really strong before Rune Master. It's just Rune Master just kind of like, is a better Sorc. Yeah, that's like a big problem. Meteor has been a big problem for a long time. It's gotten a lot better over the time. Like the mana regen affix specifically, like on weapons, has definitely opened up Meteor.
That one is crazy. Yeah, the mana regen affix. So I have it on my Firestar's Torch here, for example, and it's
insane.
Very noticeable. I think it's a tier 7 even. Yeah, it's a tier 7. It is crazy. I mean, it's even bigger for minion builds because they don't even have prefixes you really want, right? Like, it's just, it's a game changer for sure. I like in general how they gave us a little bit more tools for mana regen. I still wish they would give us some flat mana regen to maybe have different scaling vectors, but I don't know if that would maybe be too strong.
So I think mana is in a significantly better spot now than it ever has been. I think there are plenty of ways of getting the mana back that you need for most skills. The only problem that Last Epoch has had over the past 4 years, in my humble opinion, is that certain skills just don't do enough for their mana cost. Yeah. Like, for instance, if you look at Earthquake has like 1 billion more damage modifiers on its tree. It has good AoE, has good utility, does all this, does all that, right? It's great. It's a great skill. It's a good tool for Primalist. But then you look at something like Forge Strike, and it's like about almost the same mana, and especially if you take the no cooldown node, and you're just like sitting there thinking, it's like, wow, like this literally does nothing for the mana cost. And there's a huge meme in the Last Epoch community now. So what happened was Karn, he was playing Last Epoch for the first time or whatever, and he was trying to play Erasing Strike. And Erasing Strike is notoriously one of those skills that does nothing for its mana cost, at least for damage. And he would constantly run out of mana on the Erasing Strike build, because this was before they introduced a lot of the new stuff that made Erasing Strike a lot more playable. And he's like, I'm out of mana. And now, like, whenever like we run out of mana, we're just like Cardinals, like, we're out of mana. I'm out of mana. It's
I
great.
think, honestly, I don't mind it as much as I used to. Now that they have given us a little bit more tools, I actually think it's, obviously it has to be balanced correctly, but having that mana as a balancing tool, I think, is only upside, right? Instead of nerfing a skill by 30%, like you would have to in PoE, you can just say, I'm gonna increase its mana by so much, right? And you're still gonna have good burst, good clear, but against single target, you're not gonna be able to sustain it. So I think that's actually a great way to balance, especially in a game that wants you to press more than one button. I think that's fine, but I still wish we've gotten away from this, but I just do not want to play a build where it's just you have a mana generator and then your main skill. I think that is even worse than pressing a mana flask.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And one of the bigger problems in general when it came to this was there was a big like point of argument where, if, for instance, Sentinel, where all the 0 mana cost skills like Vengeance, Rive at the time, and they were really good and they felt good to play, and we're all just like, why would I ever press Judgment, or why would I ever press Forge Strike, or why would I ever press Erasing Strike? These cost mana but do significantly less damage than if I just sat there spamming Vengeance. Like, why would I ever press these buttons?
Yeah.
Now, like I said, they've gotten a lot better with this. It's gotten a lot better, but there's still artifacts of that old system. Like, for instance, if you look at like Volcanic Orb is the perfect example of what I don't want in skill design. If you just want to pop it up, like, I can explain a few things with Volcanic Orb, which is what, like, the bad things about old LE skill design.
They haven't reworked this in a while. I still remember how this tree looked, by the way. The mana cost on this is outrageous for what it does. It's like crazy.
Yeah, so one of the more annoying things is there will be people that will come into the game. It's like they'll look at something really old, like the old Tempest Strike, like, this is awful, I quit, or whatever, right? It's like, well, these skills were designed like 5 years ago. Like, they still need to be fixed, right?
Sure,
Volcanic Orb is a good example.
Sure, but it still takes away a little bit from this mystique of, oh, you can just play whatever in this game, which is just not true,
I
right?
agree, completely.
This is like one of the oldest like myths in this game.
Yeah.
Like, it's only true. I feel like only people who play Rogue say that. I honestly feel like I feel like nobody ever went on a mage and was like, oh, you can play whatever you want and you're gonna be fine. I don't think so. So yeah.
Well, that's a bigger discussion topic, which we will get into right after this. But the first thing I want to iterate is, do you see how many skill points some of those nodes can have?
Yeah.
That was the worst by far, like, skill design, like, ever. Just awful skill design where, like, I need to put in 5 points to get this bonus. And another thing that I want to, like, point out is, look, you see how there's like different branching paths for the most part? Like, there's not that many ways of getting from this way to this part, this way to that part, right? Look at Frostfall.
Way more connections,
Yeah, way more connections, way more branches, way more things to do. Like, if I want to go this way, I can go this way. And, like, look at the average number of points in each skill node.
Yeah, it's like 3, maybe 4. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can definitely see how they've improved over the years with it, which is really cool, right?
I feel like they kind of found their stride a little bit. I feel like they weren't as confident early, and they wanted to restrict a lot more. And now that they kind of, like, they've gotten a lot better at this. And at this point, they give you more options because they're not as fearful of them, right?
Yeah, I think a perfect example of this is one of the new skills, Chthonic Fissure. Chthonic Fissure is a wonder skill. It has like 20 billion different ways of utilizing it, and its tree is amazing. Obviously, it's not here on the screen, but still, like, it's absolutely amazing. Like, I agree. In terms of like its utility and everything. Now, to cover the topic that you brought up earlier about the everything being viable thing and the myth about that. So last Epoch, for 80% of it, I would say, up until Empowered Monoliths, is one of the easiest games of all time in general. If you've ever played PoE once or whatever, you'll play like last Epoch, and it's very easy. Essentially, the game was so easy, and to get to the difficult content, which is the high corruption, the T4 Trillas and stuff like that, it took time to get there, in the old corruption system, before we had Gazes of Oribus, before all this, right? It took so long to get to the actual difficult content that everyone thinks that like Last Epoch is easy, which is a myth. It's not easy. It's just the problem is the tutorial is too long. So for instance, you go through the campaign, right? Then you go through all the monoliths, which is essentially tutorial plus, right?
Yeah.
And then you get finally to empowered monos, which is like the beginning of the end game, like white maps. Like essentially when you get to empowered monos, like that's the equivalent of getting to white maps in like Path of Exile.
Yeah,
in
basically.
terms of difficulty, right? And that's like when the game really starts, is empowered monos. And since we have the normal monoliths to go through constantly every single time when we make a new character,
Have
all
to
this,
redo it, yeah.
people never get to the difficult content, which is like pushing corruption, which is partly due to the, like, because I do agree the game is insanely easy and you could play whatever the you want all the way up until empowered monos. But then after that, then if you're not playing something overpowered at that time, if you don't know what you're doing and stuff like that, like
you're falling off.
You will fall off.
Like a brick. Like if everybody who ever tried a non-meta skill in this game will, like, the difference is just as big, like maybe even more big than in PoE, but just almost just as big. It's like playing Turf for it instead of playing Bone Shatter.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem, is it's not that it's not difficult, because it does get difficult. If you've ever been like 700 corruption with the new corruption as a shaman, you'll know that it's difficult. You've seen certain mobs and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't get difficult fast enough.
Yeah.
And that is mainly because of how long it takes to get through the normal monolith, which they fixed a little bit. They made it quicker to get through normal monoliths, but it's still to the point where like your average casual player is not going to have a challenge. Like, I think PoE does a lot better when it comes to this, when it comes to challenging the player, because the stats involved, or you require like having, like, for instance, resistance caps and all that. You don't need that in Last Epoch at all. Like, you can get all the way to empowered monos without resistance capped and stuff like that. And I think the game is just too like afraid to be hard early on, because they want to be the casual friendly game, and sadly, to be the casual friendly game, they have to be easy, and that causes the problems that we currently have.
I think in order to be the casual friendly game, they would have to actually let you get into empowered monos immediately on second characters, because they need you to scale faster and actually get into harder content. And what I see especially on Reddit right now is people realizing on their second build, it's like, oh, wait, this takes me a long time until I get where I was, right? Which is kind of counterintuitive in a game that wants you to explore so many builds, has so many build-around uniques and whatnot, right? Like, the way I see this game is, especially on Circle of Fortune, is you find a cool 3 LP item, you slam a crazy Exalted on, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is a build-around unique, I'm just going to try that build, right? And it's just not really possible right now. It takes forever to get back to where you were.
Yeah, and now going back into the tinfoil hat territory again. Just so you know, this is my opinion. This is not indicative of like what's actually happening. This is just how I feel after I've been playing the game for like 4 years. It feels like as though the reason why they want to keep the grind to get to the end game to empowered monolith so long is because they haven't really added much in terms of end game content.
It makes sense.
In a long time.
Yeah, it makes. There's no progression after that. Like, there's not really much in the game to do other than increase your number. At least when you're going through the mono, you kind of feel like you're doing something. The problem is when you have leveling gear on your second character, it's already quote unquote easy on your first character. Maybe you're gonna stand like if you're not playing a meta skill, okay, you're gonna stand there for like 2 minutes at the boss, maybe 3 minutes, right? Sure. But on the second character, you one-shot them, right?
Yeah. If you want to just play one build and maximize that one build throughout the entire league, you're going to be a very bored individual. And most of the content from Last Epoch is playing alts and playing the new build, like new build, all that. Like for the first like all the way to empowered monos, like it's a great experience. But as soon as after that, there's just not enough end game to keep you going after that. I like, obviously I'm the worst person to be talking about this because I've been playing for years now and I've been playing in the same end game for years, right? Like whenever I go up back to like Path of Exile for a little bit, right? Like whenever I'm on a break, like I'll go back and I'll just be like, wow, I wish Last Epoch had more end game, man. It's because they've been busy, like because they had to redo the entire game for like multiplayer. They had to do all this, had to do all that, had to get 1.0 out. They just haven't had time to work on it. Because, like, for instance, the monolith system that we have was made like 2 to 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Like 2 to 3 years ago. That was when the monolith system came out. We've gotten little updates here and there, but the base monolith system has not been updated since then. And I think it's a good base. But the problem
For sure.
is like if you make a good base and then you never upgrade it, it's not good, you know. Like
I'm
like,
gonna say
a good
this.
basis, yeah.
I'm gonna say this, and I already said that in my review. I actually think that in general, the amount of content Last Epoch has unreleased is more than adequate. That is.
Oh, I think it's
for a release game.
Fine. This is from someone who's been playing for 4
exactly
years, by the way.
Exactly, and this is what I criticized in my review video, because I see a lot of people, especially content creators, that before the game came out had that as their main criticism and not like performance or something like that, which was my main criticism.
Yeah. Oh, performance! Oh my god!
Like the performance in this game is like, compared to other games in the show, like it's really bad. When we talk about end game, I actually have to defend the game because most of the people who say there's no end game have already done it 20 times before. They have like 1,000 hours. I think if you get into this game, you will get 40, 50 hours out of this game before you ever can even feel bored. That's my opinion, right? And that for a release title,
unless you play Dive Bomb, then you
for a release title for 1.0, that's huge, right?
Yeah, I think it's fine. It's just whenever I bring it up, you got to remember I've been playing for years.
Yeah, no, I get that completely. Yeah.
And I'm at least blessed with the forethought of being able to like understand that my opinion on it isn't correct because I've been playing for so long.
It's unique, right? I would say.
Yeah. And like I said, that's like the thing with the difficulty scaling and all that. Like what one chatter actually pointed out, right, is not many people actually get to empowered monoliths anyways. So it's not like as if they actually get to the difficult content, right?
Yep.
And it's weird because, like I said before, they want to make the casual friendly game, but they have the PoE like length of grind to get to maps or whatever and stuff like that.
I think it's actually, I would say it's longer than PoE, because on your second character, you're there immediately. You buy like a few, I don't know.
Yeah.
Either you just get power leveled, or even if you just level naturally, you just buy a few breach stones, or you buy like tier 9, tier 10 strands and just run those until you get like level 85 and you're back, right? So on second characters, I think PoE is way, way, way better. And even on first characters, getting through monos, if you're good in PoE, you can get through the Atlas just as fast. Maybe a little less fast, but yeah.
So like, I've been playing the game for too long, so I'm the worst person to be asking about that kind of stuff. Because like I'll get to like empowers in like maybe like 5-6 hours or whatever, and then I'm like pushing for blessings and stuff like that. But when I was starting out, that was definitely one of the biggest problems ever. Like for instance, when multiplayer came out, I made one character of each mastery, and then I respec'd it and respec'd it and respec'd it. I never leveled another character ever again because that grind is just so. And like I said, if they didn't have the grind, then people would realize how little end game there is in LE technically, right?
Yeah.
And that's like why I feel like that's why this is the way it is. And I hope that like in the future it can get addressed in that regard. I think that there definitely needs to be, like, I don't understand, like, for instance, you know how like they have like the campaign skips?
Yeah.
The campaign skips, as someone who's been playing for a long time, are completely worthless for the most part. Like, I feel they're completely worthless because I just get to the same point in the campaign every single time for the past 4 years, get all of my passives and idols, and then I go do monoliths. Like, I never do, like, as someone who's been playing for this long, I've only done Majasa twice.
Yeah.
That's awful, right? Like in PoE, you still have to get to Katava to go into maps, right? So you're always having to go through the campaign. But in LE, I think the fact you can do monoliths early on is a disservice to the game, because then you can't go through the beautiful chapter 9 and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they fix that, then they'd have to fix monoliths again, because the scaling wouldn't work out, because you'd get done with the campaign, you'd be like this level, yada yada yada, and like the problem is, for them to fix this problem, they'd have to rework the entirety of Endgame again, and I don't know if they'd be willing to do that. So we're stuck with essentially what we have right now. But yeah, the campaign skips are like useless.
I'm a little bit weirded out by the campaign skips, because my thinking was, oh, they're introducing campaign skips so they understand that it takes too long to get to endgame. But then, okay, they introduce campaign skips which aren't like terribly useful, or not as useful as they could be. But then at the same time, you have to redo everything up to empowered monos. So you're like knocking out, I don't know, maybe like an hour or something in the campaign. You have to get your passive points anyways. You have to get your idle slots anyways, which kind of makes it awkward, as you just said. But then in endgame, you can't even skip normal monos, which is, I think, even worse of an offender than the campaign. Like the campaign at least has quest lines. It has like voice lines. It has some kind of different things to do. But monos are just more mono grind before you can even get to corruption and get gear, right?
Yeah, I would rather be no campaign skips at all, and there's just like a boss I could fight with a key that would skip me to empowered monos. Like,
I think
that would be way more preferable.
I honestly think they could give you, you know how when you have a lot of corruption in one timeline, you can get way more corruption in the others? I honestly feel like they should just let you get to empowered monos way faster. They should just literally double it or something on your second character, depending on how high your corruption on your first character was.
What I would like it so that they could just at least allow us to go to empowered monos whenever we wanted to. Like, for instance, if I go on my second character and I'm like level 40, I'm obviously not going to go to empowered monos instantly, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go in like a normal mono and farm for a little bit. But once I reach level 70, I should just be able to go into empowered monos, which brings up another problem with the endgame grind. I don't understand what item levels are meant for. But continue.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to talk about. Thank you for the discussion, man. Was a lot of good points we brought up, I think. Can you tell people where they can find you? I'm also going to put it on screen.
Yeah, you can find me at Dreadful, DR3ADFUL on YouTube. I make a lot of Last Epoch. You just search up Last Epoch, odds are you'll find me there, unironically. And then on Twitch, it's a little bit more annoying.
Just type in any skill.
It's the same thing. It's Dreadful, but with double underscore at the end. But you can find my links down below on my Twitch and all that and stuff.
All right, man. Thank you for your insights. Glad for having you. And yeah, happy to be in this community and happy having people like you.
Thank you, man.
All right, man.
Bye.